Morning, everybody. This is Quentin Cook, and I'm with Luke Archer again, who created Verbal Aikido. I recently did an interview with him that talked all about what Verbal Aikido is about. So if you want to hear that, just visit my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to talk about his new book. So, Luke, what's your new book called?
It's called Verbal Aikido for Beginners, a simple
Okay.
guide to handling verbal conflict with confidence.
All right. So you've already written two books, and I believed at the time that those were for beginners. So what's motivated you to do this?
Well, in fact, the books previously written were for uh, beginning practitioners. In other words, people who had already had a little bit of an experience in the verbal dojo or in some of the workshops that we had done, and it was to kind of help them on their way in that, to understand it more, to be able to practice things. Whereas this one, it's for people who haven't heard of verbal aikido and who can, use it to really get the basics from the outset, to understand what the practice is about, and to even start, a little bit of practice themselves, and get into the mindset of it, and really kind of understand what can work, what could potentially work for them, and it's full of um, illustrations of that too. So.
Okay. So what's the single most important lesson or principle that you want a beginner to take away from the book?
Hmm. It's funny. It's almost a little contradiction because you can't. I mean, you can get so much from a book, but I think that the essential thing that I'd like people to get from this is that it requires practice. That it's a development of reflexes it is necessary for this to work. And as much as you might, might anyone even reads a book. I mean, do you remember 10% of a book? It's and that's straight after you've read it, and then you talk, a month down the road, how much of it is still there. Whereas, you can always refer back to this, and there are parts of the book where, you're definitely encouraged to kind of take note of certain things, and to work on them, and it accompanies that. But uh, it, what is, I think, the key thing to understand when you're reading this, that it requires some sort of regularity, some investment to develop this skill. It's an art, and you can't just read a book on tennis and know how to play tennis. You actually
Okay,
need
well,
to get out there.
so let's talk about how people can develop it. So where do they go to develop these skills?
Well, the ideal place is the Verbal Aikido Dojo, which is you can find in both English and French online. We're also working on having a Spanish version of that. Um, it's online. I used to do it a lot here in my hometown in Lyon, uh, my adopted hometown in Lyon in France, uh, and it was actually from since COVID, that kind of fizzled out, and the online became really quite popular in both languages. So we just kind of stuck to that. It's a safe space essentially for people to practice, where you know that you're going to go to you know to develop these reflexes that we were talking about, to and having this space, like I said, it's a safe space. There's protocols. It's just like a dojo. It's just like a martial dojo where people can go um, to to share what sort of situations they've been in, and that will be, the source of the dojo. That will say, okay, so imagine, somebody gets verbally attacked, maybe in their families, for whatever reason. I can give an example of somebody who said recently they were attacked because they were vegetarian, and the other person didn't believe in vegetarianism, and that was part of their conviction, so they felt kind of attacked about that. And it's simply how that sort of situation, because especially in family, that sort of thing that's going to come back again. you know that the next time they meet, it's going to become, there's going to be remarks going to be thrown, etc. So how to manage that, how to be more prepared for that. Uh, it's the safe space to kind of to see what directions you can go in, to develop that centeredness, to develop the listening skills we talked about last time, and to be able to navigate that better.
Okay, I think we need to talk a little bit more about what happens in the dojo. So let's talk about literally how you structure the classes, and then let's talk about what each part actually does to develop these skills, right? So literally, if you wouldn't mind just listing what you tend to do and how long these sessions last and
Sure.
how frequently they are, then we'll go from there.
Right. Well, there's weekly sessions that yeah, every Monday at the moment. We're trying to develop that, of course, but both in English and in French. We we start the session with what we call the pre-dojo, which is just a welcoming of the practitioners and uh, exploration of what are the opportunities to practice that they have encountered. Now, it's kind of a term that we use quite a lot, is that an opportunity to practice, which is essentially a moment where you felt tension in an exchange with somebody else. Now, whether if you managed it well, if you were able to use VA and that de-escalated it, we want to hear that. But the source of the say the cases that we practice on the mat is essentially, that's where we start. It's the pre-dojo. We listen to your cases. So, like I said, so imagine you were there at the family uh, dinner or something, and somebody makes a remark about you being vegetarian. Then that would come up. So you would, if you were a brand new practitioner, you would say, "Oh yeah, I was at a family dinner and this happened," and somebody said, "Oh, vegetarians, they're so dumb," or something like that, and and I reacted badly to that, and we go, "Okay, great." So the people who've got different cases will bring them. After that, we basically what we call we enter the dojo. We'll do a what we call a salutation, which is just a moment of connecting with gratitude. It's, in my opinion, a great way to start any sort of practice is to start with gratitude, and we finish with gratitude too. Then we go into a short moment of centering. After that, it's we'll do a demo of based on the cases that we've chosen to look at. After that, it's what we call verbal stretching. Again, we'll come back to that. And then so that stretching is that warm up. So once we're nice and warmed up to be able to practice, I or another person leading the dojo will give maybe a few pointers on what specific techniques we can practice and the cases that we're going to work on, and then off we go onto the verbal mat and practicing VA with the techniques given and the cases given, and then little bit back to recap on what happened during these, what was successful, what worked, etc. And then we finish with a very short centering and a salutation, as I said, with gratitude to finish.
Okay. So, obviously, I can understand the first part where people are bringing cases because that gives you something to practice with. I'd like you to talk a little bit more about gratitude and why you think that's a good place to start and end.
Well, I think when we talk about gratitude, I think it's such an important thing to even just talk about the whole structure of the dojo and why we do it. The intention is to make essentially the world your mat, your verbal mat. So uh, if you're just beginning the practice, I often ask people to kind of project forward and imagine a situation where in the future there's an opportunity to practice that arises, and instead of having those old reflexes, which we talked about before, I think it's the fight or flight or freeze or these sort of reflexes, it's the reflex that comes is you imagine yourself almost rubbing your hands, thinking, excellent, an opportunity to practice. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we start and we end with gratitude. So it's that projection forward of saying, number one, we're trying to take what we do in the dojo also and spread it outside the dojo, so that we're making, I said, the rubber mat, and having a an attitude towards the exchange that is one of not of fear or getting getting allowing the tension to increase within us, but it's actually one of, hey, I'm getting an opportunity to practice, and finishing also with an opportunity to practice. So the gratitude at the end. I think often when people do it the first time, they're like, "What's this gratitude thing?" But when we do it at the end, they'll say, "Oh yeah, now I see now," because you're so grateful for the people that you've just worked with that have helped you, find pathways to de-escalation, etc. And so it has that kind of double sense. It's number one, that opportunity to practice, and again for the people that you're working with, that are going to help you along your way.
So in a sense, you're trying to create a pattern that extends beyond the mat so that we're not just grateful for the people who show up and share and etc. And help, but we're also, it becomes our reflex off the mat too.
And you'll see that. I mean, I think you've noticed this yourself as well. That in fact, that attitude of gratitude, which I've often heard it said like that, is actually one that makes things a lot more simple. That it actually has an impact on the exchange itself in a
Okay, yeah, I
positive way.
like that. Okay, so you mentioned centering then, and I think we should explore that because really I think it's at the heart of the practice. So what does centering mean to you?
Well, it's re- returning to, and at least having the intention to return to that place, a stability within, or a safe space within even. Um, it's it's a very personal thing. Everybody has their own way of returning to that. I like to say that there's at least 8 billion ways of getting centered, because that's how many people there are on the planet at least. And so everyone has their own different way or ways of doing that. They can greatly vary. We talked a little bit about knowing what centering is by also knowing what it's not, so that and you have that tension. Okay, so it's the opposite of having that tension in an exchange. Um, uh, there's there's a sense of connectedness with self. There's a sense of um, serenity. That's that sort of serene confidence, and you're grounded. You're grounded in that way where you can you you can just feel safe. Feel, I guess, there's almost this, you're in the green zone. I think we talked about this before. It's like you're in that kind of awareness, and a capacity to be stable. So we're aiming to develop that as a reflex. And like as you said before, it is core in the practice. If you do any of the techniques or moves that we suggest and you're not centered, it is going to create, or the chances are it's going to create an escalation more than anything else. So uh, so returning and coming from that centered place is absolutely key. Uh, there's two parts to it, just on a kind of larger scale. We talk about regular centering practice, which anyone can do, and you can do 5, 10, half an hour. You can do an hour if you like, of regular centering that's going to help develop those core muscles. But also, what we're aiming to do is to be able to find that centered space in a very short period of time. So the centering that we do then at the end of the session is just a simple, within one breath, breathing in, breathing out, and getting closer, as close as we can, to that centered space in a short time.
Okay. I'm going to share a little bit of my own feelings about centering
Please do.
as an Aikido practitioner. For me, it's the place where you see things the clearest. and you take on board far more information in that place because you're calm, and it therefore allows you to come up with the best answers. So we're never going to solve all the problems that come our way. We can only ever give our best. But taking on board as much information as we can, which means we have to be calm and receptive, allows us to have the best chance of resolving the issues. Um, so it has a huge practical benefit in the practice because let's face it, when we feel attacked, our standard response is to get emotional. It may be anger, it may be fear, but neither of those help us really solve the solution position long term. So I think it's a huge part of what we do. Okay, you then talked about stretching. Now, I know when I first started practicing, I found it a bit weird, didn't really understand what we're doing. So put me right and everybody else. What is stretching all about for you?
It's a big subject. I've started working on another book on that, but it's in essence, it is to help people develop what we call the posture one and the posture two. That's the main thing. So there's two roles in it. There's the person participating in it, in other words, speaking. So in essence, you're aiming to practice speaking from a centered place. Also, you're also given the opportunity to be as concise as possible at a certain moment during the stretch. So, which is again is so impactful in your communication. Um, so that's the training in posture one. It's good to see it as like, you're training your core muscles. So it's almost like you're doing that plank. It's that sort of idea. You're holding that plank, you're holding that posture for as long as you can, and you're observing those little moments, those little glitches of when you step out of that posture.
Okay,
It's
so
not a performance thing. Yeah, it's really an
okay,
observation.
so what I've gathered from what you just said is that there's somebody who's talking about something and there's somebody who's listening about
Listening,
something.
exactly.
Give us an example of a stretch. I don't mean take us through one, but how a stretch might work.
Um, so I guess one of the simplest stretches might be to say, so what does this word mean for you? And then you might, so you'll listen to the person on that, and then you say, well, where does
Hang
that
on, you
come?
said something important here. We're stretching what? A word. So
Yeah, so a word, yes, sorry, that is the starting place. And in fact, that does lead on to another thing that's kind of important. It's that even though that's the basic idea of, or the main idea for the stretches is to develop those core muscles, that posture. What we've also added to these stretches is techniques. So there are techniques that are there that are useful later on. So just for example, even that very first part, which we recommend, is for the person who's going to be listening to propose three words to the other person. So there's that idea of saying, so here are three words. Which would you like to explore today? So you might say to the person, okay, so what about centering as a word? How about accompanying as a word? Or how about harmony? So you're proposing those three words. That in itself is the development of a reflex to propose three choices, and which becomes extremely useful in practice when you're saying to somebody, for example, okay, so would you like me to just listen to you now? Would you like me to help you on this, or would you like to do something else? So you're giving those three choices, which really does have that effect of allowing that person to kind of to feel that they have options rather than just two choices, which is more like a dilemma. So it gives them that psychological comfort in that. So the just that in itself of proposing three options to the other person is again a development of a technique or a reflex in itself. So once the person who is speaking chooses whichever word they want, then let's imagine they chose the word harmony. Then you'll say to them that so the listener will follow a sequence. Now there's dozens of different stretches that exist, but the reason that they're going to follow a specific sequence is all the protocols in the dojo are to protect the people involved, but essentially this one is to make sure that they are really focusing on the neutrality, or as close as they can, as the centeredness and neutrality of their listening skills. Um, so it might just be those three simple questions like, what does that mean for you? So what does harmony mean for you? The other person will express. I'm going to simplify it here to, to not try that too much. And then we might say, so where does harmony come from? And then explore. And then we might say, so what does harmony lead to? And that will be explored too. So that's a very simple one. Generally speaking, we do a little bit more than that, but that gives a kind of idea of what's going on. And again, the words, or the questions that are being asked can be, so as a listener, you're also practicing how to use these techniques in a nice centered way, so that you're not saying to a person, what does harmony mean for you? You're saying, you're developing that reflex to express the question, and to be then just that wonderful, as I say, kind of satellite dish to receive as neutrally as possible the other person's expression.
All right, so I'm going to share what I've learned from listening. You can tell me whether I've learned the right stuff.
Go ahead.
So, firstly, it is about developing your listening skills. Because when somebody's attacking you, it's really important to really hear them. Why are they attacking you? Find out what it's all about. So it's about learning to ask questions, learning to ask the right questions so you get as much information, and then the other person really feels that they've been heard. Um, and it's learning to stay calm and neutral in those situations too, so that they really feel heard. And I think the last thing that I've understood is that very often when you're exploring a word, you discover it means something completely different to the other person. And that knowing that actually the words we use are not always heard in the way we mean them is really important, because it can lead to a lot of miscommunication and a lot of conflict.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so trying to find out what people really mean is a very useful skill.
Absolutely. Between what somebody wants to say, and then what they actually do say, and then how it actually comes out, and how it's actually interpreted, and etc. There's all these kind of potential moments where things can go awry. I remember working with somebody many years ago, and we were doing stretching, and she kind of liked it. She really liked the process, etc. And like, just like you say, the subjectivity of words. She went back home and talked with her husband, and used kind of some of the words to understand where he was coming from. And she came back the following week to say, Luke, for 10 years, me and my husband have been fighting over this one thing. And I just realized after stretching with him that he meant something completely different than I meant. And it really does go to show you, like you said, there's such a subjectivity in words that it's amazing that we understand each other half the time.
Yeah. And I think learning that actually the response to someone attacking is not usually to talk back, it's to listen more. And only when you've created space to see if they're willing to hear what you think about whatever the problem might be. Yeah, a very important skill. So the next stage in our dojo, I think you said, was we take some of the cases and we explore them. So, if you've got 10 people in a room, that how are you going to allow each person to practice?
I feel that the best makeup for these rooms is either 3 or 4 people. It's it's great to have a position at some stage, especially if it's your case. If it's, say, for example, you bring a case to the dojo and you say, yeah, it was this, I'm vegetarian, etc. And uh, so you'll be put with at least 2 other people, or 2 or 3 other people, but essentially, let's say it's two. You'll have one person, so you'll be asked to throw your case, throw what happened to you at the most experienced practitioner in that group, and they will just try to manage it with VA as much as they can. The third person is taking notes of what the practitioner is using. So that we call that the scribe. They'll be just saying, being able to, so you can recap through it, what happened later, what worked, what didn't work, etc. And where the energy shifts work, because that's kind of the most important part of the recap. Then it shifts around. So using that same case, the practitioner who has just received that energy, it's like you've passed them the ball of the attack. Now they have that energy, and then they're going to throw to the other person, the person who was scribe initially, and you. And this is a great moment, if it's your case, especially that you're kind of sitting back and you're able to see how that the dynamics roll out, and watch the energy moving between people and seeing what works, what doesn't work, and then finally comes back to you. So the person who was originally described that now has got that attack energy ball and is going to throw it back at you. And you can take a little moment to kind of go, okay, what were the good techniques that worked in those cases? Right, let's take a little note, and you can prepare yourself, and then off you go, and you just try and explore it. And it's harder. It's always harder for the person who who originally received the attack, to go through it. So that's why I said it's a safe space. At any moment, you can call time out and say, "Okay, I need a second," or "Let's try that again," or anything like that to kind of to help you feel more comfortable, and to find a direction that works for you. So I kind of try and minimize the amount of chatty time in these, as much as, I mean, we all love conversation. People who come to the dojo, you generally kind of like chatting, etc. But the especially time on the mat is kind of precious, and we try to make sure that everybody gets a chance to practice, and the focus is on using those techniques, developing as much as you can.
Yeah. I think it's worth emphasizing that when people come to do an Aikido, physical Aikido mat, that they're trusting their bodies to the practitioners they're practicing with. And that's kind of a great gift. And in the verbal Aikido dojo, it's the same thing. You're trusting something that was painful with a bunch of strangers, and hoping that that trust won't be broken. You won't be made a fool of, you won't be made uncomfortable. Um, and it isn't abused. And my experience of it is that people really get a lot from the share, and what they find really.
Yeah.
Same with
Yeah.
the stretches. It's interesting that people are often so surprised at being given the space to really talk. And they're very grateful for that too. So it's interesting. People like to be heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is, yeah, that is a kind of a commonality that we have, but definitely, uh, having that safe space, it is precious. I don't know of any other place that you can do that sort of thing that than on a verbal aikido mat. Is But it does go to show that for me, and I congratulate people kind of regularly for actually pitching up and showing up, because you're going to a place where in essence and it's the same with martial aikidos, you're going to be destabilized, you're going to get taken off your your vision of how you see stability. So that is, it takes courage to just to walk into a dojo and say, right, I have something I want to work on. And as you said, there's obviously a trust involved to be able to say, I know I'm going to a place where it's there's protocols, there's a structure around it which has been thought out, and that people are comfortable working together with. Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes sense now why you finish with a centering and gratitude, because people have maybe been made to feel a bit uncomfortable, and you want to let them leave feeling good about what's just taken
Absolutely.
place.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great. I think here really useful for people to know what they're going to experience if they read this book, and how they can follow through and develop the reflexes that you're talking about. So next step is to find the dojo. How do they find it? You said they're online. How are they going to find that online? Where do they go?
Well, it's verbalaikido.org. Uh, it's kind of easy access. You can just go to the online training part of that, and you can even find a lot of pointers in the essentials of practice. So the kind of, if you feel like you need to kind of be uh, you know clued in as to what's going to happen in more detail. There's information on that there too, and simply you need to I guess go to the store to sign up. But you can always just try out a class for free just to see if it's something that works for you. If you like the group, and if you like how the process works, just you can give it a try for free, and then if that's good for you, off you go. It's
Okay. So when people start practicing verbal Aikido, what do you find are the sort of common mistakes and pitfalls that people fall into? Because you don't become an expert overnight.
when people start at first, they do often think, right, I'm going to do a few sessions, and I'm going to be able to manage it quickly, and it that can work, and you can be successful kind of easily initially with a few things, because your posture will have changed a little bit, and you kind of see things differently. But uh, I think the expectation uh, of a kind of snapping fingers and things just suddenly working, that kind of, we have this era at the moment of the download, where or streaming, where it's always there and you can do whatever you want at any moment. But contrary to that, you this requires effort, and it requires, as I said from the start, those reflexes that you need to develop. So I guess one of the main things that people will have is actually, it becomes your self attack. So you'll say, "Oh, I could have used verbal Aikido there, and I totally forgot about it." And this is something um, uh, that can be discouraging a little bit at first, because you'll say, "Oh, but what it is these are quite self attacks." So, and that's something that we look at as well, is how to manage those internal attacks, where we're attacking ourselves and saying, "Oh, I'm no good, I'll never get it," or things like that, uh, uh, which is essentially us, attacking ourselves, and which is, like I said, something that at least once a year we explore on the mat too. So I
Yeah,
think that's one of the big things.
I think I want to emphasize that. And from my perspective, nothing that's really important in life is an instant download. You actually have to work at it. And if relationships in your life are important, and they probably ought to be, then this is a very important skill to develop, because this is all about managing relationships and when the relationships are not going so well. And no, it doesn't happen instantly. Uh, you have to take time and put the practice in to develop the skills. Okay. What was one of the most challenging things about writing this book?
Um, I guess it was. I think the first thing was to not repeating what I had said previously, and so I know that when I did. So I actually did three books previously. I did something called the Green Belt and the Orange Belt, and then what I did was I compiled those two, and I updated them in the last book I wrote, which was From Conflict to Conversation. So kind of got the best of, I think, over 10 years of practice. I just put them all together, and I know yeah, I did, like I said, a best of that. So, but when I started this book, I really wanted to start it, from a clean slate, um and it was after I had worked a lot with schools. So I had this wonderful couple of years of experience working with with teachers, and teachers who were working with young kids. So their objective was to make it really clearly understandable. So this is what we worked on a lot together, and so using many of the things, and the ways that they had of explaining it to like 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. That was kind of the I guess that was the starting point for me for this book to really be able to say, okay, if a 5 or 6 year old can understand this, then anybody can understand this, and to start really from that and take them through in that process.
Okay. So I think you've said something really important here, which I'd like to just explore a little bit. Any really important skill in life, the sooner you start learning it, the more chance there is you've got of mastery in your lifetime. Working with schools sounds like a really smart place to start with verbal Aikido. Please share what happened in the school when you practiced, when you were able to get that to make part of their practice within the school.
Well, it, I felt really so lucky in this opportunity that I had. It was the school principal contacted me. It was just before COVID, and she said that she was interested in this practice, and she told me a little bit about her position. And I said, you know, we've already worked in other schools too. We hadn't worked at that time in a primary school, and she said, oh, and she seemed kind of interested in bringing it to the school. Eventually, finally, when COVID had kind of uh, we were able to we were able to actually go to see people there. I remember the first time with masks, etc. We she introduced me to the team, and there was a team of like I think it was about 11 teachers, and I gave them an overview of what it was about, but I then initially asked them, can you, okay, the best way to understand verbal Aikido is to feel it. So have you got any attacks that you've received? And you can just throw them at me. And as it happened, one of the teachers had just the day before been verbally assaulted by one of the parents. And she said, yeah, and threw the verbal attack at me and maintained it. And I just practiced as kind of, you know, as you would do if somebody threw a punch at you in martial aikido, and essentially, um, you know, it de-escalated quite quickly, and I just asked her, so how did she feel at the end of that? Did she feel humiliated, or did she feel that she had won or something? And she said, kind of neither. It was just now we're conversing, and thankfully, I mean, that won the whole team over, and so that was great. I mean, having the whole team behind you in a project like that. The headmistress of the school, Angelique, was absolutely uh, you know 100% behind it as well. So we really we started off with that with the kids for so the idea was always to make the school kind of independent. In other words, to allow them to become the trainers and to create that space within the school where it was just normal to to look at verbal attacks and see what's the best way to manage it, protecting both the person, both people involved. And they got good. They got surprisingly good. Even at the end of the first year, we did the whole thing with, it wasn't belts, we called it bracelets. So they had bracelets and they were given awards and things like that. And it was extremely motivating for them. And then, you know, I brought the teachers up to a position where that they could manage those dojos too, and have enough techniques and enough practice themselves to be able to facilitate any of those sort of exchanges. And they had their different styles, which was again a wealth of of pedagogical information in itself. But and in the end, what was kind of interesting was that so the director of the school, so the headmistress Angelique, said to me, Luke, I want to be part of this project, and she now is the person who manages the educational side of Verbal Aikido here.
And what's been the impact on the children? What's the
But
reported impact?
this is one of the things I asked her recently as well, because we were interviewing with a school in Taiwan, in fact. And I said, so yeah, well, what impact did it actually have on the school? And she said she recognized a thing about, she said somewhere between 25 and 30% of the amount of times that people were coming into her office to complain about things, it was greatly reduced. She noticed that one of the teachers was there right at the start, but then went on maternity leave. And when she came back, she was saying the atmosphere has changed here. Something's different, and there was a kind of a serenity that had kind of crept in, and that people felt more confident in being able to address it. So not and that wasn't just, like I said, it wasn't just in the between the kids. It was also on the team level, and even managing the parents and things like that. So, but definitely in the schoolyard, the teachers were then able much more quickly to say, so what did we learn in verbal aikido? And remind them. And the kids would literally get centered, take a deep breath in, and say, okay. And they would, like you said, if you're coming from, if at least one person has the presence of mind to say, let's get centered before we continue, there's going to be a better outcome. It's inevitable. Like you said, it's that clarity of what's going on, and you're not allowing all that emotions to kind of to overtake and to often to the detriment of the relationship. So essentially, like I said, there was a 25% approximately reduction in the amount of altercations, and just a kind of an overall sensation of well-being, that occurred for
Okay.
everyone involved.
So I'm just going to just pause for a second and ask you and me and the audience who might watch this to just reflect on what might happen if we could get everybody in the world doing this. It would be a different place.
It would.
And so I think really that it would be a really good place to kind of tie this up for today. So I'm just going to ask you, where can you get the book and what does it cost?
Books available on Amazon. It is, as far as I know, it's I think €18. It's I don't know how much that is in sterling or in dollars. Whoever's listening to this, but it's very reasonably priced. It will also be available over the next couple of months. It's going to start to be available in bookshops too, but and also obviously it's on the website verbalaikido.org. If you go to the store there, you should be able to pick it up too.
Okay. Thank you so much for what you've told us today, Ewan. Good
Thanks
luck
for
with the
having me,
book.
Quentin. Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care.